Good evening and welcome to Whiskey Wednesday. Tonight, joining once again the ninja, Dr. Jason Pittman. Tonight we're going to be talking a little bit about how deep thinking can assist you into realizing who your better self needs to be. I'm your host, Dr. Dan Ford, and this is EchelonOrchid.
Guess who's back?
Ninja, what's going on, my friend?
How you doing, my dear friend, Dr. Dan Ford?
I got to tell you, I got to figure out a little bit more about this sound because, like, when the sound goes off, I literally, I think someone could hear it miles away in my ears. I'm probably going to go deaf because of this show.
Did you get your hardware mixer in?
Yeah, dude, I'm using a Sound Blaster.
Okay.
So it's it's a relatively entry level. I mean, it's got some stuff that I haven't really played around with yet. Like there's some voiceover stuff in here. There's even a couple like pre-done. Like if I really want, once I get the studio completely done, like when I say something awesome, I can make it like clap and cheer. And when you say something, it'll boo. Stuff like that. But the funny thing is, like, I always see this meme. It's not even a meme. It's like a short on, I don't know if it was American Idol or something like that. And so, this one, I think it was Demi Lovato says, "I don't think this is really your dream." And the dude comes back and says, "Well, at least I don't have to use auto-tune." So there's an auto-tune aspect in there. So, I mean, it's a nice little entry-level thing. It's got a lot of stuff to play with. I mean, I've got that, a nice professional mic over here right now to where it's got that true HD sound into it. So it's got that three-prong.
Yeah, the thick plug.
Yeah. So it's got that going in there. It's nice, but I just have to figure out. I think because, our boy Stoney, this past Sunday, where I had used it for the first time, he's like, "TK's really low, you're really high." I'm constantly changing volumes. So I probably could either just lower him, but then it's going to be hard for me to hear. There's got to be a better way to where even if, like, on some particular headphones, you can adjust sound here rather than through the Sound Blaster. But hey, it's a learning process. I think it sounds a ton better than what it did, because there was always this echo aspect I felt.
Yeah, well, like on your Sunday shows, because I've listened to those. I don't listen to our own shows because, well, I lived that experience and I don't want to rewatch it. TK has sounded, I guess I would describe it as hollow. Mm-hmm. And that's because of the distance at which the sound is being produced into its input. I don't know specifically what mixer you got, but you should be able to, at least conceptually control input and output per channel. And so if you have everybody on their own channel, so to speak, it takes tinkering, man. But I think that's one of the beauties of at some point it actually is a science. He should actually talk to you about that, man. If you really want a shortcut, it's Pete.
Oh yeah. I know Pete knows. And I just haven't really figured it all out. I mean, I know that there's a number of different things I can change on here. And there's a way to do like a multi-output, so I can have this being an output versus going into the live stream and output. And I haven't figured that out. So right now, it's all the same. So you all, you sound like you're screaming at me in a way, and but to the audience, it seems copacetic.
Yeah, right. Because the output is softer, but yeah, I get what you're saying, man. It takes tinkering. On one hand, it seems like it should be like simple plumbing, like connect this to this and get the output to that and stuff. But in practice, when I tinkered with it, at least virtual mixers, it didn't work as simply as I thought it should.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably multiple different things, but hey, it's a work in progress. I'm just hoping overall the stupid stuff that we wind up saying, because outside of advice when it comes to leadership and innovation, all the other stuff, like hey, they should be fact checking us and doing their own research and do whatever, right? Because then it's a lot of it is opinion versus stuff that, hey, we've lived this. We know it works and we can help. But, all the other things, dude, fact check us. You know what? You don't agree? We're open to being wrong. So come on, pony up and come on. Let's hear what you got to say.
I'm open to being wrong because I know I'm right.
Hey, I'm open to being wrong so that way I might learn something. And I just haven't found someone in a long time that I can learn something from.
Oh, there it is. I was waiting for it.
So
these streaming. Sorry, real quick. I'm just streaming setups can get, especially because you're capturing multiple video inputs and outputs. It gets quite complex. But
yeah. Someone said to me that, why do you always have to be right? I'm like, I don't. It's just the facts. It's just the results. I can't help it.
Yeah, the Earth doesn't have to spin either, but it does.
Yeah. I just go, which gets into this stuff. I've just spent a longer amount of time thinking about many different pieces of data than what others do. And therefore it seems, why do I always have to be right? No, I just have better data. And that data is results. It's based on the scientific research. It's based on actually performing some experiments. It's actually finding out if people are yes people or do they have a strong backbone. I'll say stuff to people all the time that I'm not entirely sure about or that I know to be false just to see if they'll say something. Mm-hmm. I've gone so far as in the proverbial when it comes to leadership or technology, and you're like, hey, sun rises in the west, sets in the east, just to see what they're going to say. If they don't want to call me out, it's not someone that can be a part of my inner circle.
Right. Let's go back to that idea of more data. Mm-hmm. Having access to more data and being able to, let's say, synthesize or keep in your conscious thinking more data. Would you construe that as being deep? Like if I were to say, I think you're a deep person, Dan, is that how you would take the meaning of deep?
So let me clarify in that, are you referring to deep as the same thing as depth?
Yes.
Then yes. Because I think in some cases, depth could very well also mean the breadth of which you are trying to consume that information rather than just being narrowly focused on something. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. All right. Now, and some people, they may consider them similar, but I want to try to take in as many, like when we do intellectual property research, it's not just the aspect of that one particular point we want to have a patent, but all the ways in which that patent might be defeated, we also want a patent. So
right.
That to me is the depth of knowledge. You've circulated it all, and maybe there's something that means deep. So yeah, I have to cover all this.
I'm with you.
So I absolutely that data has to be rich, and I test it. And so look, I utilize technology in order to assist me in making better decisions. I put different things out there, and when I'm doing certain experiments, I absolutely use machine learning. As a matter of fact, we did way back when COVID was starting as to how we portrayed a machine learning algorithm. So when people go, "Oh my gosh, how they're saying that the decisions," new inputs came in. Mm-hmm. And therefore we have to change. Like a new input is going to alter the results. And so when I look at the data in that particular aspect, I'm always looking at that R squared. And then from there, what's my p-value? Right? If my R squared is like 50%, it's probably not correlated, and it's probably not what I want to be using. I don't have my confidence factor.
Do you consciously have this idea of what I'm thinking, and how does that relate to some R squared value? Do you really think that way?
Yeah, I want to know how confident I am in that particular.
Hmm. Interesting, because that's really interesting to me, man. Because I don't. Um, I'm with you as far as bringing in not only deep, right? That is very focused, but laterally broad. That is different data points from perhaps seemingly dissimilar verticals. 100% with you. I don't know that I ever think about consciously how data points, especially broadly, laterally, might or might not be strongly or neutrally or insignificantly related. I don't think I'm conscious of that. That's interesting to me.
I would say, well, no, this is conscious because I make a concerted effort to look at that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. Yeah, and I'm saying I don't. It's
Yeah.
interesting that you do. Yeah.
Well, that comes into while we come to very many of the same conclusions, the way we attack problems is very different. And so, if I were to take the greatest university on the planet, University of Michigan, and they're the Michigan model of leadership, they have these aspects as to who you are as a leader and how you kind of solve problems. So, similar to a Briggs Myers, and they come up with, you've got the sage, you've got the engineer, you've got the artist, and you've got the athlete, and each one has a certain amount of attributes. And I know because we're all somewhat everything. Like, you always have some things or everything. I don't know of anyone that's got like 0 in something, but it might exist. I just don't know. But I am like the lowest, and there's a huge disparity between this one and the other 3 is engineer. Mm-hmm. And part of that engineer is they like policies, they like procedures, they like step 1, step 2, step 3, and they hoard information as a way of controlling power. That's not me. I'm very, very transparent. What I'm actually predominantly is with sage, which is the person who likes to get the best out of everyone around them and tries to find ways in which they can get people to outperform their own expectations. Like, that's what I tend to gravitate towards. Probably no surprise. Goes back and forth depending on my mood, is what's my secondary. Artist, which is that creative thinker and comes up with the pie in the sky, which really drives the engineer crazy because that's the opposite of it. And in many ways, that sage drives the athlete crazy because the sage does want everyone to get along, and sometimes the athlete, which is blue, just wants to plow ahead. So I go back and forth as to which one are my predominant. I tend to think I'm more athlete in that once I know what needs to be done based on input from others, I would have put the right pieces in place, and then it's go time. If I had to say you're much more of artist athlete or athlete artist, rather than, definitely not engineer. Like, processes for you are like politics. Corporate politics. It's like, this is insane. Not worth my time.
Yeah, well, okay, so I'm really interested in this, man. I hope you don't mind, because it's turned into me interviewing you now. Because I think at this level, this is where the details are, where you and I think differently. And so I'm really curious about it. And so do you think you start with this idea of what that correlation point is, and then as you're thinking, you're evaluating where you're at in reference to it, and you're realigning yourself to it as you move through, let's say, a thought stream or a project, or however you construe that? And I'll tell you why you're thinking about this, why I ask, is because it's just occurred to me as we're talking that fundamentally, because of the way we're different at a very root level, I think you tend to have a bottom-up approach, and I think I tend to have a top-down approach. And we meet in the middle, and that's where all of our overlap is. But how we get to that middle, or that output, as you said, is the difference.
I would actually say, in a way, I actually look at both because I'm constantly evaluating where I am in reference to whatever the object is, as well as is that input to the object a valid input. And so I'm constantly going back and forth, and in many ways there's an actual reason to this. I am internally having positive conflict within myself in order to create that innovative approach to whatever it might be. And elaborating on that, just when people ask me for advice on something, I tend to ask them, do you want to know what I want to do? Like what would I do in your shoes? Or what I think you should do, knowing your goals, which many times are completely different. I would do something completely different than you. But if you were to say, and me knowing you for as long as I have, hey, I know kind of what your goals are. So I might, all right, are you looking for a different opinion? Or are you just looking for me to tell you what I think you might do, get me knowing your goals? And you might want both. And the only reason I ever bring that up to someone is when I know they're different to me. To me, they're different. So that way you have it. So I always take that object and I'm always evolving around it because I don't know. And so I keep test on both sides. What would I do? Okay, this other part, is this still valid? Based on that object. And sometimes when whatever that object is, I throw out. All right, it's no longer relevant. Actually, it was the wrong thing to be testing in the first place. So I'm not going to waste any more time.
Well, because it's interesting, because if I remember right, 2 weeks ago, it would have been 3 weeks ago, right, when we had our last show, we'd spent a little time talking about IQ.
Yeah.
And this is one of the things you see at successively higher IQs is that for as much as we are the same, where we're different is so divergent that it's very significantly materially different. That's interesting, man. That's really interesting to me. The way in which we acquire and process information at a very core level is different. And I think, because you and I talked before, just even in over drinks and or a coffee shop, right? About our Myers-Briggs orientation or our temperament orientations. And we're one minor letter off. But that one minor letter off is what I'm talking about at the extreme polar end of this curve of let's say, IQ. It's actually very divergent. And that I think that, at least for me, it helps explain to me why we are different in this very minor way. I'm sure to outside people, we're almost identical. And probably that's because they don't spend a lot of time with both of us at the same time. But
if they ever spent the time at a table when we just talk and we just and we're drinking, there are vast differences in the way we think, even though we may come to a similar conclusion. But the way in which we do it is vastly different. Now I don't remember what your Megs bars. I'm an extreme ENTJ.
I'm an INTJ.
Yeah. And a lot of that comes down to how we get our energy. Yes.
Well, but that is the difference between those major archetypes, though, right? And that explains exactly what you're talking about. Not that I'm necessarily a big proponent of Myers-Briggs and the way it measures that. I think there's better ways to measure it, but that one letter difference, E to I, is a material difference.
Well, and that's why I also, from the Michigan model, why I'm a sage. Yeah. That sage wants to work with the people in order to putting that team aspect. Like they get their, we'll say energy in this case, by their successes. So if they succeed, I succeed. Right. If they fail, I fail. Right. So it's constantly, because if they get better, in return, they're going to make me better because they're going to understand more information so they can ask better questions, which is going to make me have to come up with better solutions to whatever it is they're going to come up with, or at least collaborate more in order to get to those better solutions.
Right. And if I remember right, the archetypes in a psychological way if I remember correctly, ENTJ is what maps to the commander archetype.
Yeah, I don't remember, but I think so. Yeah.
But in commander maps, at least somewhat synonymously with the way you're using the term sage in that other model. INTJ maps to the map.
It is the Michigan model.
That other model. That other model. INTJ maps to mastermind.
Yeah.
Right, but the difference between a commander and a mastermind on a lot of levels is almost indistinguishable. But it's that one level, and it's really the focus of that energy. Absolutely agree.
Yeah, and getting this back. I mean, again, so for the whole topic of this is that deep thinking. We've both spent a lot of time in solitude, still thinking, and I think regardless, that same goal, it has all. I mean, how are we going to be our better self? What does our better self look like? And, I have so many people ask me, like, how do you have all the smart? And I just go, I don't think I am. And maybe that's just because I surround myself with people like you and TK and others where I go, hey, I'm smarter than many people in many things, but not in everything. And I know what I'm not smart in, and I surround myself with those kind of people because, hey, I'm looking to always learn from an interaction, and I hope I'm also giving of something in those interactions, helping those people be better. But I spend a lot of time just thinking about professionally, personally, what do I need to do to get to my better self? And that's part of the show. This is literally a video blog of me trying to evolve. Because I got to think about stuff. I mean, I hang out with some straight up murderers when it comes to the intellectual thought.
Well, so now I'm really curious, dude. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate your patience with my questions. So would you say, in all honesty, being transparent and forthright, that your perception of your thinking is that, at least to some degree, you have the ability to think faster about something than somebody else that's thinking about the same thing? Would you agree with that?
No.
No?
No. I think if I were to put this in a different, just slightly altering it differently, I believe I have only thought about many different things for longer and for an extended period of time on a particular subject. So when there is a particular debate, so to speak, what comes up, I've already thought about. So it's at that very easily recallable. Now, if someone has brought up something that I haven't thought about and it doesn't relate to something I've already thought about, I feel at that particular point, I do reasonably well and are quickly articulating an argument or counter-argument just because I've been so disciplined in my approach for, I don't know, I started this process like when I was about 22. So for the last 24 years, I've been doing the same thing and trying to be better. So that discipline, I feel like because of that, I can go through that process I have developed internally quickly. But I feel like to myself, that might still seem slow. When compared to what maybe others are, there's many people that can think faster on their feet. Like I think probably, and I would love to debate Jordan Peterson, but I think his mind works so much faster than any person that I have witnessed, maybe outside of... Actually, no, I think he's probably the fastest and the most articulate in the way he thinks. And I just think he's disciplined. He's thought deeply, very deeply about very many things. And he's genuine to himself. And so I've probably over the last, I don't know, when did his Maps of Mind book come out? 10 years ago?
That was a long time ago, yeah. More than.
So
Maps of Meaning?
Yeah, Maps of Meaning. I probably read that maybe 10 years ago, and since then, I have kind of altered my way. That resonates very well with me. So, I mean, I've seen him be stumped by people, but then very quickly go through a process and start dissecting it orally. And then, boom, he just... So I would love to aspire to that level of debate. You don't know what the other person's going to say.
Right.
But that's how I think it is. I don't think I'm that much better. I think I'm disciplined, and I go through that discipline, and I don't stray. If I don't know it, if I can't come to a true reasonable conclusion to my thoughts, I'll just tell you. I think it might be this, but I'm not entirely sure, and I'm not even entirely convinced that I even believe this. I have no problem saying that.
It's interesting you bring up Jordan Peterson, because I think this is something. Well, okay, so if you've not listened to there's one or two lectures in particular or interviews he had where he was taught. Somebody asked him a question, or I think it was actually his course lectures, where they were talking about IQ, and he talked about
how it's the number one predictor of future success.
It's one of the three, yeah. For sure it is.
And that it's basically, this is a big thing. I think this is a big thing. I don't know if this is the part where you're going, but I want to make sure people understand. Across cultures, IQ is almost identical between men and women.
Yeah. That's not where I was going, but I agree with you. But he has a particular part where he's talking about IQ, and he talks about his evaluation of himself, and then actual empirical quantitative measurement of himself. And he's talking about part of the reason why he is the way he is because he has a very, very high verbal IQ, which is why he can speak so eloquently, so publicly, right? And very quickly. And that gives the appearance of quick wit. What's interesting to me that you use that as an example is it's actually an example of what you're saying insofar as, this is my understanding of what you're trying to convey, is that for every, let's say, 1 hour of Jordan speaking that seems like, and he really is, in my estimation, one of the best orators of all time, certainly of the 20th and 21st century so far. His ability to speak publicly and convey emotion and meaning is second to none as far as I can tell. And that's because of his very high verbal IQ. He has a very high IQ to begin with, okay? For every 1 hour that we're watching him, we don't understand that that's probably hundreds of hours in the background consuming information. And that, to me, when you hit me up earlier and asked and told me what you wanted to talk about, I immediately thought about artificial intelligence and machine learning and the way deep learning gets constructed, insofar as we give these algorithms massive data sets to train them, and then they express these very distilled down, let's call them thoughts for lack of a better nomenclature right now, that seem like almost infinite godlike wisdom. And we focus on that godlike wisdom, and we forget that it took, the model I've been working with for the last month is trained on almost 900 gigs of text. Yeah, of course it spouts out some Shakespearean sonnets, man. It's 900 gigs of tokens, words, phrases, so forth and so on, right? That get distilled down into this body of mapped meaning, to use Jordan's book term, that then when you ask it a question, it will give you a cogent answer, what seems reasonably cogent. So I don't know, man. I actually think you sell yourself a little short there.
Well, that gets back into one of our previous episodes in terms of imposter syndrome. But I think that you're certainly onto something here, because I spend 2 to 3 hours a day easily easily, on average, just working on bettering myself. And when all of a sudden I get into that particular environment where someone thinks they've got me, I can take them to the depths that they have not yet even thought about. I can put pressure on their pieces of information because they've only just started that thinking, and I've thought about those things for hundreds and hundreds of hours. And I'm very comfortable. Yeah. I'm very comfortable with that.
Well, right, because I would argue that nobody wins Trivia Pursuit or Jeopardy, if you want to take a modern construct of that, by having a lot of knowledge. I think the way you win those games is through memorizing facts. And I'm not begrudging that or denigrating that, but it's different. I think people do well in certain verticals when they have a lot of knowledge. I think what you're actually trying to hint at in some way is what happens around the time that we're hitting in middle age, is that you started now to actualize knowledge into the world in a practical sense, and what you're doing is instantiating wisdom.
Yeah, and it's interesting with this because, all right, so I don't remember what this card game is that I wound up playing last weekend. Don't even remember, but it's something they play here in the Midwest, and they keep talking about it. And so a couple came over and, all right, you want to play? I'm like, okay. I'm like, all right, you all keep talking about this card game. Let's play it. And it's played in pairs. And you basically play it. It's like, it's 9 through ace. And,
Canasta?
No, it's not that. The trump cards change all the time. And I don't know I don't even remember what it's called, right? It doesn't matter.
Dude, if they ain't got dice and models, I ain't playing it.
So they keep talking about it. All three of these people are from the Midwest. And so everyone always wants to break it down in terms of, like guys versus girls. Let's see who's going to win. I'm like, all right. And it takes a little while to go through, like, who's going to win. First round, me and my partner win. And I'm like, I thought you all said this was hard. Second round, they win. Third round, now I really know how to play this game. And it was just destruction. And they go, especially the missus, I can't believe you won that. You've never played this stuff before. And I'm like, hey, once I truly understood the rules, then I no longer play the game. I'm just playing the player.
Right.
I now understand. And no matter if you're in the corporate boardroom, you're, wherever you're at, I feel, I definitely know I don't have a verbal IQ like Jordan, but I feel I do pretty well in those environments because I've spent many hours just thinking. Actually, and I will go so far as to say is if I don't spend a fair amount of time every day thinking, I feel that day was a loss. I truly feel it in my being that I did not live up to an expectation that I hold myself to. And it does. I check those days off. Like in my calendar, I'll write a big X. I did not live up to a day that I'm supposed to have. And I always hope, and I don't think I've ever actually surpassed this, but my bare minimum is to never have more than 30 days that I didn't live up to that goal. So essentially it says I have 11 months out of 12 of being someone that overproduced in a way, or overconsumed, overdid whatever it took in order to be better. And I look at that because I believe the majority of people in the world take off the opposite. I think they're the exact opposite. I think they spend 30 days improving themselves.
Yeah, well, because tell me if you agree. the way I see it, if you're going to engage in critical, deep thinking with the goal of improving yourself, it's actually at minimum a two-step process because you have to be able to deconstruct the time period, let's call it a day, that's ending, and that's part of the input into the next one. And you also have to be aligning yourself towards some goal going forward, and both of those have to happen more or less at the same time. And I think that if there's one or the other that people fail to do, because I agree with you, most people fail to do it, I think it's in realigning themselves going forward. And I think that's actually, as a coach or a mentor or a shaman, if you will, one of the most destructive things people do is engage in negative self-speak. They don't actually engage in positive self-speak.
I agree with that. I mean, I know I'm very, I will say, I expect a lot of things from myself. But that's why I go, okay, I may not be the smartest person, but I'm definitely very disciplined. I'm disciplined in how I approach everything. I have a framework, and I know that framework works, at least for me. So I don't go outside of that. And sometimes I don't live up to that, but sometimes. The rule, definitely do it. It's helped me tremendously. I mean, I go back to how we were starting the distillery. I didn't know anything about zoning laws, and I had to get stuff submitted. I had to write a package. I had to learn. I had to lick my wounds, which was for about a minute in this particular case, because I didn't have time to feel sorry for myself. Then I had to learn some zoning laws, learn them very quickly. And there's a lot. I had to craft an argument as to why we should be granted an additional permitted use into our area. Then I had to sign off on it because I don't own the property, I lease it. So I have to get them to sign off on things. And I had to get it to these people. All that stuff had to transpire in 4 days. But if I didn't have that framework, if I didn't have that discipline, it wouldn't happen. Wouldn't have been able to do it. There's just no way. To me.
Yeah, I think it's very process oriented.
Yeah, everyone around me was like, "Oh, you can't do this." Matter of fact, many people, even that I know, who have known me for a significant amount of time, they just think it's silly that I'm even doing distillery. They even think it's silly that we're doing this podcast. I'm like, okay, well, what are you doing tonight?
Yeah, they're not on here.
But they're definitely not on here, and they're not doing something that's bettering themselves or those around them.
Right.
They're off.
Well, that's the hard work.
Yeah, they don't want to put in the hard work. They don't want to go to the deep waters. Speaking of which, how's your book coming along?
Fantastic, man. We ultimately decided we turned down a publisher's offer, and we decided to self-publish it, and we're probably collectively about halfway.
You're going to go back through Amazon?
Yeah, I think so. Well, because, it's hard to place this work, first of all. We decided early on that we didn't want to engage an agent because of the overhead associated with it.
Yeah.
And so that kind of constrained the type of publishers we could deal with. And it was just some silly stuff, man. It was some silly stuff. And we decided what was best for this work was to get it done. And there are some mainstream things, like here's the biggest one, right? In case nobody knows this, the fourth Matrix movie is coming out next month. Okay? The subject matter and some of the underlying philosophical undertones of that movie, I don't know what to call it because it's not a trilogy now, it's a quadrilogy, whatever, right? Map to what we're talking about. And so to not be able to release a book in close conjunction to that, to me, was folly. And the only way to do that was for us to do it ourselves.
So, what I mean, it wouldn't be a trilogy for sure, but it could just be the first thread in the next trilogy.
Yeah, sure, sure. But if we went through a traditional publisher, man, it might be this time next year
Yeah.
by the time what we're doing is released. And to me, that's first of all, I can't work on a time scale like that. Like that's just too far off in the future, dude. I'll be done writing in another month with my part, and I'm off to the next project. Like, right? So we had this very strong sense that the work's important, it's timely because the idea gets talked about a lot in mainstream culture, and so let's capitalize on that as fast as possible.
How much time do you spend going back and editing your own work?
Very little actually, very little. So this is probably one of the distinct advantages I have over people when it comes to writing, is because I've been doing it for so long, because of the process I go through behind the scenes. And so this is a lot. This is very similar to what we were talking about with, like, for instance, the way Jordan speaks, but nobody realizes how many hundreds of hours he's put into thinking about speaking, right? Because of my process in constructing my writing, when I'm writing, it's almost like final draft quality. I don't go through a lot of iterative process in terms of the actual mechanical writing part, because I've pre-thought almost all of it all the way out. And here's real quick. Here's the big part, and this really is what separates the way I write from other people. And I would suggest most people that are prolific in writing, this is what separates them, is I learned how to not get in my way. Right. So what I think is what I write. I don't have to manage like translation, if that makes sense.
No, I get it. And I only bring it up because I recently watched a podcast with Jordan, and it was a very recent one, and they asked him about his books and his writings. And he talks about how he goes through like every sentence and tries to figure out how to make that sentence better so that there can be no ambiguity in that. And he actually spends more time editing his own words than he did actually writing them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know if that's because he didn't start off with someone with an English literature background. He's a clinical psychologist and thinks about things differently just in what we do. But I found that very interesting. And I wonder if that's because he had to learn how to write, like myself. Like I had to learn how to write. It didn't come naturally to me. I thought I was a decent writer, and then we went to the doctoral program, and I got slapped down a bunch of different times. And like, all right, well, I need to learn how to write, and so I go through that process when I write. How could I make this better? But I don't know if that's the reason. I have no idea if that's what Jordan. I don't know if that's his. I don't know what his undergrad was in. I have no clue. I don't remember. He may never even have talked about it, but I know your background is in English literature, and therefore you definitely have a better command of the written word than what many do.
I really think it really comes down to, I mean, there's really only two ways to go about it. Either you write and then think about what you wrote and improve upon it iteratively, or you think, iterate on the thinking internally to a point where then you just let that come out onto the paper. And so, I will tell you, if there might be something to what you're saying in terms of background, and if there is, I would say that it has to do with, remember, I started writing fiction, not nonfiction.
I mean, that's basically your entire career.
Yeah, well, listen, man, if people only knew, right? There's something when you're writing fiction, because you're dealing with this construct of a muse, and that muse is fickle, and it's only there for a fleeting moment, and you have to be able to get that out of the ether through you as a conduit onto the paper as fast as possible, because that thought's gone. And so I think through the process of crafting fiction as an art, as a creator, that if there is something to what you're saying, I think I would argue that's probably what it is.
You ever think you'll write fiction again?
Yeah, of course.
How loosely will it be based on your career?
It wouldn't at all, man. No, listen, it would not at all. Well, I mean, I say that not at all, and I don't mean 100%. It's that, it's that the fiction I enjoy reading and the fiction I enjoyed writing um, is rather divorced from reality, and thankfully so.
Oh, wait. So the fiction. Wait a minute. So the fiction you enjoy reading versus the fiction you enjoy writing are different.
No, no, no. Those fictions, what I enjoy reading and what I enjoy writing, are divorced from reality entirely. Like they're thankfully not really real.
Well, yeah. I mean, I've seen your WoW characters, so I understand.
They're more creative than my career. Yes, that's a fair statement.
Well, so that's definitely true. But I mean, so what genre of fiction would you be writing in? I think I know what you might be writing in, which I would
What's your
say.
guess? Rate?
Well, I think you happen to. I mean, based on how, at least at one point in time, how often you spent in your World of Warcraft characters, and you and the misses, and even your stepson, how often you all played together as a family and things of that nature. I think and especially knowing your tabletop games in terms of Warhammer 40,000 that you enjoy. That there's pieces to that folklore that you enjoy, and that's you would be writing in that particular genre.
What, like fantasy? Is that what you
Yeah,
mean?
yeah. Well, fantasy that's based on a Tolkien-like
Yeah,
genre.
that would be incorrect. No, that's not what I wrote, and that's not what I would write if I did.
Which what genre would it be?
I actually really enjoy, and you have to like break this down a little bit, right? There's a very specific subgenre of horror called splatterpunk.
Okay, yeah, I can see this.
Yeah, and it's I mean, you could obviously say it's fantasy because it's fantastical, right? But it's ridiculous to the point that it's almost coming back full circle to real. So, like, here's a classic story, dude. Classic story. Well, I'll give you one of mine that's actually published out there. I wrote a story and I published it in written form, and I actually did this on a spoken word on an audio format. So, like, before audiobooks were audiobooks, you did spoken word. And it was a story of a guy that worked in a coal mine and hated his life. He was miserable, and he would come home every night and get drunk. And one night he was sitting in his house by himself, getting drunk, watching big time wrestling on the TV. And he went to the bathroom to get sick, and he got sick, but what he puked up was his evil twin. And his evil twin chopped him up with an axe and took his place in real life and started murdering people.
Well, this took a whole new twist.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So, all right. So I know we're about 8 minutes over your hard stop, but I got to ask you this. So, all right.
Oh, you asked me anything. Go ahead.
Well, this is a slight divergent, and I'm not sure what's going to happen from this piece.
You
But
can't really follow up the evil twin.
no. This is a complete tangent. All right. So for those that don't know, recently got accepted into the Google's partner program. The show's monetized, and we've made a whopping 4 cents. But what's funny? So I went, all right, monetize all of my videos. Like you can just checkbox all, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And they have different categories: can't be monetized, limited, and full. Basically, that's all it is. So with our shows that we've done as co-hosting on a percentage basis or even number count, how many do you think have been not able to monetize, limited monetized. Because the other ones, of course, it's not relevant. But let's go to the first one. How many are not capable of being monetized?
And make sure I understand. You're talking about the ones where like this is just me and you.
Well, maybe you, and maybe we even had a co-host on.
Oh, okay.
Or a guest.
At least, right. So at least you and I.
Yeah.
See, man, the weak part of my personality would guess that it's few and far between, which makes me feel like it's the exact opposite. Like the majority of them have the ability to monetize in some way.
The majority is absolutely monetized. Absolutely. And so none of them have been put into the category of not able to be monetized. So, what percent, or if you had to pick an episode that we've done that was limited, which one do you think it would be?
Oh, man. How about the one with Mitchell when we talked about?
That's the only one. That's the only one that's limited with you.
Because of course my instinct was anything with fucking TK in it.
Oh, almost all of my ones with TK are limited because we talk about things like COVID, politics, right? And this is what's interesting. They're still capable. But none of my episodes have been blanketed, not able to monetize. But as soon as we start talking true politics, as soon as you start talking about anything COVID related, it's limited. It's like truly, not just mentioning the word COVID. Like Google's a little bit smarter than that. They look at those kind of things, but it's truly those kind of things of shocking content, stuff that could be heavily controversial, and so you still get monetized. It just limits you into the advertisers get to see whether or not they want to deal with that, and they choose if they want to or not. But it was really quite funny. Our only one is with Mitchell, which I think, honestly, is the best episode that's been produced.
I think so. I would agree with that, man. Because I've actually gone back to watch clips of it every now and again, and I check on its views, at least from my outside perspective of its performance. And man, to some degree, when I was experiencing that, it seemed a little crazy. But man, it's not. I don't go more than a couple of days without seeing something on the news somewhere within my sphere of the Uyghurs being persecuted and their organs harvested. And I mean, I gotta say, man, I don't think the guy's making it up. And it seems to me that it's actually happening, and it really seems to me that the world doesn't give a shit. And so I was actually at some point going to ask if you're interested in having him back on.
No, I definitely want to, and no, I don't think he's making any of it up. I mean, this is a particular topic in the UN, right? So, organ harvesting is real. I mean, I'm seeing this stuff whenever I go to California. I get, as soon as I land in the airport, someone's handing me like a flyer about that stuff, right? And I got to tell you, the first time I truly felt like, and we've been doing podcasts since like 2014, right? And we've transitioned formats, things of that nature. And we've had some guests even when it was This Life in Tech to now. That was the first time I felt like we were true journalists reporting something of nature. And
yeah, man, and and I think that's why, because not only does it on a human level draw me to care about it, because it's fucked up, man. That's a really fucked up situation in a lot of ways. But because I had that same sense, well said, man, that this is an opportunity where now this is like a legitimate platform that we're interviewing somebody about something that's actually really going on outside of the scope of really what we really normally do. And that's why I would really like to talk to him again, to be able to ask, now that the shock value is gone for me, more journalistic type questions in a real sense.
Yeah, because here's the thing: I asked you beforehand because I did a lot of research on it.
Mm-hmm.
I said, "Do you want my information that I have, or do you want complete shock value?" And you're like, "I want shock value." I'm like, "Okay."
Yeah.
Which is actually, I kind of in some ways enjoy that part because then I get to play that host. I get to ask the questions. Ninja, what do you think about this? Like, I thought he was great. I 100% believe him. I really do. And he's been on many other shows, so it's not like I was his only show. Like he was on for what the guy's name is, but he's been on Joe Rogan a little bit and has been demonetized. He's been considered way extremist on some things, but still, he's got a lot of following. I can't remember his name, but I want to say it's like Adam something or other, but he's out there.
I mean, he's definitely not a quack. He's definitely not a quack. I mean,
yeah.
And he's definitely a real person. I mean,
well, and I can tell you what time zone he's in because I can see that stuff from the email SMTP header, and so he's either faking it or he's truly over in that region of the world.
Right.
Tend to believe he's over in that region of the world. I mean, he didn't come across as someone that was very technology astute.
Right. I would agree with you. Not enough to fake SMTP headers.
No. So, anyway, well, I've kept you a little bit longer than your hard stop because I don't care about your timelines.
Hey, man. Hey, I sit here and took it. I could get up and leave if I wanted.
Yeah,
Good.
anytime you wanted, you can get up and leave.
I just treat you like my wife. I tell you at 8:30 when I really just want 9.
And she probably wants 9 as well. Take that however you want. Anyway, I always appreciate it, my friend. I think in 2 weeks we will have our returning guest Ravi on.
Nice.
Now, you remember when he threw down the gauntlet telling him his sister wouldn't come on.
Yes.
I've pretty much figured out that only 3 people fit on this TV. Like you get more than 3, it just doesn't look right. But we'll see it. We'll see if his sister comes on. I've told her, Ravi says you'll never come on when he's on. You're too scared.
Yeah, I think she's a coward if she doesn't show up.
Oh,
I'm with Ravi on this.
They are. It's very interesting because they are at opposite spectrums.
Well, I really just want to ask that guy at some point, how mommed up is he?
He's in the construction business in New Jersey.
Yeah, I know, man.
Who knows?
I know.
Who knows? Well, my friend has
maybe sorry, real quick. Maybe I can tell some stories of where I grew up and people being mobbed up.
It's Ohio. Who cares?
Hey, man, you'd be surprised.
I don't know. I grew up, and there's still gangsters there, and they tell you they're gangsters, and they don't care, and then they write laws legalizing everything they do.
Oh, Jesus Christ!
It's called DC. What they do? You want to talk about gangsters? I probably just got us limited in our monetization on this show.
Hey, man, why not? Double down.
Whatever. All right, my friend. Well, hey, have a great week. Hope to talk to you soon. Give my best to the missus, and we will chat soon.
Right on, man.
Take care,
everybody. Have a
all right.
Cheers.
Peace out.